Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast, where we talk with the people behind the current events and breakthroughs in brain implants in an understandable way, helping bring together various fields involved in neuroprosthetics. Here is your host, Laden Yurachek.
Welcome to another Toronto Rehabilitation 2019 Spotlight interview presented by IFAS, the International Functional Electrical Stimulation Society. Thanks to them for sponsoring these episodes. Do you guys want to introduce yourself?
I'm Steve Plymale, and I'm the CEO of MyndTec.
My name is Milos Popovic. I'm the Institute Director of KITE. KITE is a research arm of Toronto Rehabilitation Institute, which is the hospital within the University Health Network hospital system.
So we're here at Rehabweek in Toronto. This is the first time it's been in North America. And Milos, you've been instrumental in bringing this event to North America, which is the first time. Can you tell us a little bit about the road that you took to get here?
So about 2 years ago, I got my team, and we thought it would be a great idea to bring these societies to North America. And then I worked with my local organizers and my own team. We put together the plan, how this is going to look like. And we went and we pitched it in London, 2017. And apparently the pitch was very good, not because we got it, but people are even talking about it today, how good, impressive it was, and how we sold them that, if they don't go to Toronto, it will be a major mistake on their part. So we had unanimous vote, which was exciting. Every single member, about 20 of them, voted favorably to come to Toronto.
You should be a salesman. What are you doing?
Maybe.
He is.
Well, he is, actually. So on that note, Milos, tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, you started off as an engineer, and now you're an entrepreneur. So tell us.
I got a degree in power system engineering, which is building nuclear power plants and control of power delivery and that stuff. And then I did it in Belgrade, Serbia. And then I moved to Toronto, did my PhD in robotics, in controls and complex nonlinear systems. And for some reason or another, I decided to abandon both of these careers and move into aerospace. So Dash 8Q 400 is the airplane. I participated as one of the system engineers on that. So that was lots of fun. I enjoyed that. And then sometime in 97, I got this job offer in Switzerland to build neuroprosthetic systems. So I took the job even though I did not know what the neuron is. So I thought, okay, this sounds...
So you went from aerospace to neural engineering.
Exactly.
Overnight.
Why did they think that you were capable of doing this?
I actually asked my boss. I suspected that he wanted to kill the program. So he selected the least competent person to run it. So I think Manfred Morai, who was outstanding and world-class control expert in the world, he's very well. I think every possible medal that exists in the field, he has it in his cabinet. He hired me because somebody told him I'm good. Actually, Dan Popovic told him, he's great, hire him. And he's okay. He hired. My excuse was, Switzerland is a lovely place, girls were cute, chocolate was amazing, and I can learn the language. So I thought, that's a good idea. So I took the job and I started learning. I got Guyton and neurophysiology, and I learned on the job. And 4 years later, I got a position here at University of Toronto to build the lab, and 20 years later, we have one of the largest neural prosthetics enterprises in the world here in Toronto.
Tell us about what you've built in Toronto, because when you came here several years ago, but now it's kind of this, we're starting to see it bubble up as an innovation center in this neurotech space.
So when I came in 2001, we actually had no research on spinal cord injury rehab. So I asked to be cross-appointed in a hospital so I can have access to patients. And that doing things without working with patients is just senseless, right? So I needed to have access to patients, and then they appointed me in the hospital. And I essentially start building the enterprise from scratch. So in these 15 plus years, that particular enterprise went from 0 to 90 people. And out of these 90 people, 9 are principal investigators, meaning university professors. So we have now Krista Musselman, who is expert in physiotherapy and FES. We have Kathy Craven, who is a physiatrist, top of the line. Cesar Marquez, brain-machine interfaces. Jose Zarifa, neuroimplants and interfaces, peripheral nerve interfaces. Kay Masani, exercise physiologist. Julio Furlan, physiologist, Sukar Kalsirayan, who designed all these tests for assessment of grasp and reaching and grasping. So she's with us as well. And probably I forget somebody about that. And myself, yeah.
You'll get an email later after this broadcast of who you've forgotten your team. But yeah, so you brought on a fantastic team. You're starting to build up, and now you're starting to translate some technologies out. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So we originally started building the neuroprosthetics with intention to use it with patients for neuromodulation purposes, for restoring voluntary function. And I was building a team such that we can design the electronics and get all the hardware and software ready for it, but also build a team that can run clinical trials. And when I started running clinical trials in 2000, 2003, it was very unusual for an engineer to run randomized controlled trials. So building that capability, building that skill set, and bringing people to do that was really important. When we start getting really good results, then I got a crazy idea we should start a company. So we formed the company in 2008, and we were struggling because I know how to do things, but I didn't know how to sell it, pitch it, or get the funds. It's a different art, right? So we were lucky that somewhere in 2011, 2012, I ran into a person, her name is Diana Plira, who actually looked at the technology. She thought it has a great promise. And then we got a first round of investment. We built a stimulator, and then we're now moving forward. And now Steve is leading us. And we had a couple of rounds of investment, and the company is moving really well.
Yeah, so Steve, let's pull you into the conversation. Steve, tell us a little bit about this company that Milos is talking about.
Well, this company called MyndTec is a company I was actually aware of before I met Milos. I had actually seen them. It's a rather small community here in Toronto, the medical device community. I'm a medical device guy. I've been involved in a number of medical device companies. And I was introduced to Milos by a mutual colleague and said, you should talk to Milos about this company. Probably could use a little help in terms of their growth plans. And I have to say, I was overwhelmed with my introduction to the technology. I knew a little bit about neurostimulation from a previous company, but I always thought the science of neuroplasticity was a little bit of voodoo until I was formally introduced to MyndMove by having Milos hook me up to the device, and he asked me to clench my fist. And then after pressing the stimulation protocol, he said, we're going to open your fist, and he did. And I thought, okay, this thing really works. But that just set the stage for conversations with patients and clinics and all sorts of stakeholders and finding the clinical data to be absolutely compelling. So I thought, okay, this looks interesting. Let's see how we can make this company work and become successful. And I was invited by the board to take a look at the company and look at its business plans. And we've now got a solid plan to take the company forward.
We're on audio instead of visual. Can you kind of describe the device to us?
It's a device that has a tablet embedded in it, and it includes both hardware that does the stimulation and software, which has a very unique approach in terms of using protocols to stimulate muscles in a very specific sequence. And actually, Milos is the developer of the software and the hardware design. The device itself is rather portable, can be brought into the clinic, and in fact, we think in the near future it can be extended into home use. And it's used to stimulate muscles in a way that helps patients overcome their deficit through a very intensive regime of therapy from somewhere to 20 to 40 hours of repetitive use. And maybe Milos, you want to take a second just to sort of comment in a clinical summary of the device itself.
What is exciting about the device is that there are a couple of elements. The first element is the level of sophistication with which you can provide fine controlled movements is much higher than has been shown in any other product. And people who are competing with us, who have tried the product, said this is outstanding. We were never able to do that, which is very nice and take a lot of pride in that. Now, when you have the device that actually mimics the way the brain does the job, then when you start training the patient with paralyzed muscles in a way exactly how the brain used to do it, then the brain kind of starts recognizing that melody or the sequence. And it's much easier for brain to understand what you're trying to teach it. And eventually, the circuits which are sitting there are some other redundant circuits which were engaged in the process of controlling, reaching, or grasping, get involved, and they start taking over and relearn how to do that task. there are various ways how the technology works, from sprouting, increasing number of stem cells, using different parts of the brain, using different parts of the spinal cord to execute the task. But fundamentally, you use existing resources. You shift the center of gravity from damaged part of the resources to the existing part of the resources, which can be retrained to do the task. And then you strengthen those pathways through all kind of repetition. So patients are doing therapy repetitively. There's a variety of things. So they do different grasps, different reaching, different object manipulations, and it's an active task. So the task they need to do every day, like grabbing a sandwich or picking up a fork or things like that. So things that they actually need to do, they want to do, and then it makes it real, and they're committed and engaged both emotionally and mentally in doing the task. That emotional engagement and mental engagement in repetition helps them retrain. 40 sessions plus patients regain the voluntary control. But what's interesting, after every session, they're exhausted. They're not exhausted physically. They're exhausted because of this mental engagement.
It's pretty intense. The other major differentiator, I think, is the fact that Milos has perfected this stimulation in a manner that is very tolerable. There's very little discomfort in the actual regime of therapy. And with other technologies, this can become a major barrier to patients discontinuing with the regime of therapy.
So this type of technology is really tapping into, instead of it being a prosthetic where I'm going to stimulate a muscle and I want to create a movement, is that you're positioning it as a rehabilitation device where we're tapping into the resources of the brain and trying to do this neural re-education. So we can do a treatment, but then there'll be some carryover so you can actually get some functional.
That's correct.
It's organic.
Not fighting the plasticity, but using plasticity.
Right. We're not compensating. We're actually organically retraining the brain to compensate on its own organically. So that's the beauty of this, is that it's durable. And when we look at the actual clinical results and talk to patients who have been treated now for many years, they still have maintained the success that they had initially in the clinical therapy. So it's pretty compelling.
So could you give us a quick synopsis of where this device is today, where you are in the development phase for MyndMove?
Yeah, so we have a device right now today focused on upper limb, and the company had received its medical device license in Canada first, and so the company went to market here first. And we have about 12.5 clinics across Canada in various institutions, some large, some small. And now we've recently received our U.S. FDA 510K, and so we are cleared for market in the U.S. When I arrived, the company had been really low on cash, so my first task at hand was really to use my skills to raise some capital, which we did. This past spring, we closed a capital round of financing of $2.3 million, and that gives us now the funds to invest in the growth and infrastructure and resourcing our sales and marketing teams. And so we're ready to now focus on the U.S. market and continue our working off the success in the Canadian market as well. And then next year we'll be setting our sights on the CE mark and bringing this device to Europe.
So really it's a clinical device as it is today. Can you tell us a little bit about your pricing model and how you've gone through the regulatory process, now you got to get people to pay for it, right, to keep the company going?
Well, that's the challenge. You know, it used to be in the old days that the real hurdle was the regulatory approval. Today, it really is all about the payment cycle and reimbursement. And unfortunately, in Canada, under the single-payer market provincially, there isn't any reimbursement for most of the therapy. We see insurance coverage limited to motor vehicle accidents or workers' compensation type cases. In the United States, there is some miscellaneous codes being used for physical rehab medicine blended with tools. And so the actual therapy is combined with the use of tools, and that single payment is really shared by all of us. So we have decided to go to market with a slightly different model than the conventional medical device approach. We don't sell capital equipment. And in fact, we're not asking any of our potential customers to make an initial investment in capital equipment. We're completely eliminating that risk of purchase and placing our units free of charge in institutions that want to adopt the technology. And then they pay for the treatment on a per-use basis. Our entire architecture is a cloud-based structure, so we can electronically deploy software, security updates, and collect data. So for us, It's a mutual benefit of having a connection to all of our customers through the cloud. And this will enable us to deliver new software and new protocols efficiently. So we're just in the early stages now. We've done some clinical evaluations at some fairly large institutions in the US, both government and public and private hospitals. And we've had great success in the early clinical evaluation stage. Now we're ready to present our commercial product for adoption.
Excellent. So yeah, it's more of this subscription model, right? That you're going after to create that type of cash flow.
It does eliminate that upfront risk, and for us, the introduction is all about adoption. So we really want them to see the benefit of this device and its treatment, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible to access as many patients as possible.
So when we talk about patients, who are you targeting? Because this is really an upper extremity neuro rehabilitation device for people that have upper extremity deficits. What type of people are you looking for that would be the target consumer that would be using this type of device?
Well, I mean, our indications for use on upper limb are addressing a number of different patient populations with a large focus on stroke, primarily because of the size of the population. We're also addressing, complex injuries, spinal cord injury patients, acute brain injury. We really strategically want to focus on facilities that have some visibility so that we can maximize our own visibility to the market and are willing to help work on making that visibility as prolific as possible. So we're looking at people who are willing to do some early research with us, perhaps do some publications, and that's really the strategic focus in the early days of a small company like ours releasing a product to such a large market. We're trying to be focused.
Yeah, and you're getting some great exposure here while we're here at Rehabweek.
We are indeed.
Yeah.
Very cool. I'm very curious. I really don't know much about the Canadian healthcare system, and you were saying they don't really reimburse you for this, and so are there advantages to this, or is the advantage that you have to be more clever in how you build?
It's a good question. The real challenge for small companies like ourselves are to find the best way to create the economic argument. In provincial healthcare systems, it really is mostly about the cost. And we're trying to overcome some of the barriers to market by demonstrating how compelling the clinical research is, but also the economic benefit as well. Our job is to translate the clinical efficacy into an economic benefit. And that takes some investment in terms of organizing formal data so that the government can assess it and make a determination on what it's worth. In some respects, the U.S. market is similar in that it's turning to a value-based approach to medicine. And you have to prove your value. And the only way you can really do that with those types of entities is through data. So we are organizing ourselves to collect the data in a format that can be presented in a way that is compelling without ignoring the obvious clinical benefit. But you have to pay attention to the economics. And really that's been one of my strengths in my previous companies is how do you take an unproven technology and demonstrate its benefit in a healthcare system. We're a 510K. By definition, we are equal to other technologies, including conventional therapy. So we have to demonstrate why we're better. And that's been our focus as we launch ourselves into the U.S. market.
We've been talking a lot about the technology and about the startup of the company, but we didn't touch on your background. You've been involved with quite a few startups. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background that landed you here at MyndTec and MyndMove?
Like I said, I consider myself to be a device guy. I've always been fascinated by medical technology. I started out in diagnostic imaging with a small startup here in Toronto a few decades ago and worked my way through several companies in different areas. My last company was a small startup with 6 people in the area of prostate cancer treatment. And we took that company with no money, 6 brilliant engineers, and we raised about $60 million. I ended up taking the company public in 2015 and got it to about $100 million market cap. When I left, of the 60 people that worked there, 17 had worked for me in previous companies. So I thought that was a pretty good badge of honor to have so many people follow me. And now the last company has now started to spawn off other people who followed me to this company. So I've just recently hired a VP of engineering. He's worked for me in 2 previous companies, and we're building the team. It's a fascinating experience to take a small, successful device like this and commercialize it, and it's fun. So I'm really enjoying this one.
Well, thanks so much for your time. It was great to meet you, Steve, and Milos. Always great to talk to you. And when we'll be enjoying the rest of Rehabweek, can you tell us what excites you about this event? What excites you about this?
There are a couple of things that excite me about this event. First thing is there are 4 societies which form this Rehabweek together, right? This is ICORD, it's IFAS, sorry if I can't remember, there's in the virtual reality, and there's also the industry association in rehabilitation robotics and stuff. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to add some clinical part to that. So I managed to convince ACRM to join us. So they were at the beginning a little hesitant because these are all these techie-driven people, but they really embrace it and they enjoy it and they're doing well. And we brought another 2 societies to the conference. So we expanded the flavor, the breadth, and made it more clinically flavored, right? That's one thing. Second thing is we actually brought more people to this event than any previous Rehabweek. So that's
How many people do we have here?
I'll do the Trump thing as 2,000 people.
We're in Canada, you can't say that.
It's tremendous. The last count, which is about a week ago, we got 1,200 people who are paying for registration, but there is different companies and partners who are coming, and through them you have additional couple of hundred individuals who are on board. So when I looked at the list on last Wednesday, it was about 1,650 people who are supposed to be here in all kind of different capacities, and that's before the conference started. So I don't have the real number. I'll probably have it tomorrow, and then we'll share it. But it's big, and what is exciting is we managed to get people from China. You know, despite all this commotion that we have now between China and Canada, we worked very hard with the Chinese government and Canadian government to bring over 120, 150 Chinese delegates, and every single one came, except for one, which I'm very proud of that. And we have people coming from all over the world to be part of that, and that's exciting.
Excellent, yeah. Well, I know we can't take you away from this event, but thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It was great to talk to you, Milos.
Thanks,
and Steve.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hope you enjoyed the show and were able to learn something new, bringing together different fields in novel ways. Until next time on the Neural Implant Podcast.